This is SaaS Therapy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of SaaS Therapy, the show where we help you save your most important business relationships, your customers. My name is Todd Kirk. I'm your host, and I'm joined by Disney fanatic, Casey Trujillo. Casey, welcome.
Well said. Give me a churro at Disneyland any day, and I'm a happy man.
Yeah, I should probably clarify. You're a man who loves the food at Disneyland, specifically. Not necessarily like a Disney movie connoisseur. I don't know that I would ever call you a movie connoisseur, but a Disneyland churro connoisseur for sure.
Yes. Well, one of the things, Todd, is I have four children. I can't say children; they're all adults now, but they try to keep me hip. They try to keep me in the know, Todd. And so they're always dropping knowledge on me, let me know what mid means, letting me know what the latest terminology is. And they gave me a new one that I hadn't heard of. So the ones that, kids were always concerned about, like 5 or 7 years ago was FOMO, right? Fear of missing out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now it sounds like there's a new terminology, which is fear of messing up. Well, they use another acronym than that. It's a children. It's we're a PG show, so I'm not going to use the one that they actually use.
Yes.
Fofu is what it's actually called. Fear of
Fofu.
Yeah. But we're going to say messing up, right?
Sure.
And it paralyzes people into not making a decision because they're afraid the decision that they'll make is going to mess up their lives, right? And I firmly believe, Todd, that this has now entered into the business world. It was, okay, we just got to grow as fast as humanly possible. Don't worry about profitability. Just go, acquire, right? And now it's all about profitability. And I'm afraid of losing my job. And so I make no decisions, and the status quo is good enough for everybody right now, as long as I'm profitable. If I don't need to grow, I just don't need to lose, is what today's mentality is in business. And so, Todd, I know you've been working on some ways to better understand where maybe someone's coming from. And you have a framework that you're going to share with our audience today to really understand when people ask questions, are they asking you a question because they are fearful of a decision? Are they asking you a question because they just don't believe in your product or you? So I'm excited for you to drop this knowledge on us, Todd. Give us some of this business riz. I don't even know if that was the right way to use that, but
Casey just analyzed, or he just Casey just alienated, anybody in our audience under the age of 27. Just with that, so good. So yeah, I have been working on this framework for about a month or two now. One of the things that I've realized in my career. So I'm not traditionally a sales guy, right? My background was in professional services, and product management, and content development, and training, and all these different experiences that I've had in my career. But one of the things that I've realized more and more as I've gotten older is that every part of my career has been sales, whether I was actually a sales guy or not. In fact, what I don't think most people realize is that all of us, especially in the United States, as we've moved more to a tech-based economy, we spend all of our time on selling. Most people do, whether you're a seller or not, right? So like, as an example, if you're a product manager, guess what you spend all your time doing? Selling internal people on your product roadmap, right? So the fact of the matter is that all of us have to learn the skill of knowing how to sell, regardless if you're traditionally in a customer-facing role or not. And so in that process, I realized that I every time I would talk to people, I would notice these types of questions or hangups that they had, and I wanted to understand that better. And so I spent a lot of time just trying to basically create a way in my head to wrap my brain around where people's mental state is when it comes to actually making a decision and becoming invested in that decision enough to actually follow through with it. Because what's funny is you mentioned the fact that we have decision paralysis, but I actually think making the decision isn't the end point of the sales process, right? Because even if I decide that I feel good about doing something, I still have to carry it out. I still have to follow through. I still have to make some sort of a change. So for me, I realize that there's this kind of journey that we all go through in our decision-making process of actually being bought into some sort of an idea. So that's the groundwork for that framework. Is that helpful? And should I jump in right away and just
it's super
say what
helpful?
It is, or what are your thoughts?
No, I think it's super helpful, and let's go through it. But I think that there's one other principle that people need to understand. And again, I'm just going to keep on throwing out cool terminology because I'm just a hip person.
Hip.
Despite what the internet says, there's a small percentages of Karens out there, right? That are just people that are just mean. Really, my belief in a business setting is most people are kind and courteous. And the reason why that's a challenge is they don't tell you what's really going on in their mind. The second principle I think is important for us to understand is people don't like to be, I don't want to say combative, but share their thoughts in that they feel that you're just going to sell them back. Like, hey, I'm struggling with understanding this. And then you're just going to go into total sales mode and convince me otherwise. So I'll just keep that to myself. I'll walk all those thoughts through myself, right? And so usually when you're like, hey, did that make sense? Yep, that made perfect sense. Or how are you feeling about this project? I feel great. Do you? Because your actions are showing that you're not feeling that, right? And I think this is a great framework to start to understand maybe where is somebody really at and how do you draw that out of them so that they feel safe and comfortable in discussing these type of things. So I think that's the other thing that I love about your framework, Todd, is helping people feel safe and comfortable in telling you where they're actually at. So
yeah,
I don't know if you want to react to that.
It's a really good tee up here, because one of the things that I think we tend to focus a lot on in our skill, and the skill we try to focus on in sales, at least in the things I've seen, is like, how do you ask really good questions as a seller? And asking good questions or asking effective questions is an important component to it. But if you don't have the emotional intelligence to understand what your customer is thinking, the questions they're asking themselves, you're really going to struggle. And by the way, I loved we're not Karens, we're kind and courteous. And I'm not cool enough to get something started here, but man, all I could think of is like, be a Kindle or a Curtis, be kind and courteous. Could you be Kindle or Curtis? Is that our new phrase?
There we go.
You're a Curtis, not a Karen.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was really dumb.
That was beautiful.
Okay. So with that context in mind, the first part of this framework that you have to think through is that we're talking about the questions your customers are asking themselves, not the questions you're going to ask them. So first part of this is the first questions they're going to be asking themselves are believing questions. So let's say you are someone who is pitching some solution. Pretty much every part of sales is you're going to ultimately pitch a solution or a change. And a believing question is if they believe that solution can actually do something. So that might be something like, is this platform right for us? Or, I've had bad experiences with this vendor in the past, so I don't know if I can trust them in the future. It could be that they don't know if the solution you're pitching is actually going to solve the problems that they have. It could be that they don't think that there's any sort of ROI from it, or they might believe that it's going to be too difficult to switch. It's going to be too hard to change, right? So those are examples of believing questions that they might be asking themselves. Is this something that I actually think is worth it? So that's the first stage. And so if they're asking you questions that make them seem like they're skeptical, or they're looking for proof or ROI, or they're looking for social validation, that would mean that they're not even fully bought in at all at the idea that there is a solution, or that your solution actually is worth investigating at all. So that's the first one that I think we need to understand. And I'm curious, in your experience in sales, how often do you feel people are in that bucket of, I'm not sure I actually believe that this is a solution that I even want to give airtime to?
Oh, I almost said that I believe, because you said the word believe. So I just had to match that with the word believe, right? It is, I always say that there's there's three things that a seller needs to have on their side: is a belief in their product, a belief in their leadership, and a belief in themselves. Because you need to convey the belief to the person that you're talking to, because we're all skeptical. I mean, as much as we want to say we're not, we are. As you're walking through what your product can do, that's why you're drawing out, what are the challenges that you're facing? What are you currently doing? Because what you're saying is, in your current state, the results are going to stay the same, and you have to change to get different results. Now, that might be better or worse, and that's what the other person on the other end is trying to decide. Is this going to keep me at the same level? Is this going to help me become better, or am I going to be worse off from if I make this change? And they're also, another framework that you have, Todd, they're also considering, is the effort worth the results? Mm-hmm. So yes, I could bump this up 1%, but is that worth all the effort that you're going to make me go through, that I believe I'm going to have to go through in implementing your solution? So there's also a belief, not just is your product work, but is it worth the effort I'm going to have to put in to make that happen? Do I believe that I can actually use your product? Yeah, your product might fix it, but man, this is some big CRM implementation. This is going to take us 6 years, and I'm going to need to go ask my boss for 4 other people. That's not worth it, right? So I think there's some different stages of belief, not just the belief of it, can your product do it, but belief, can I on the other end run it? And is this worth it in what I'm trying to do?
Yeah, that's right. I would say to steal from some change management frameworks that are out there. In every case, when you get to this stage, it means that the person you're talking to is aware of you to some extent, that there is a solution that's out there, and they're now entering into a contemplation phase, right? So they're actually when I talk about questions, you're contemplating. So when you are contemplating a solution, you're aware that it exists, but you're not really sure if you can believe it or not. And you're right. In belief, I would say there are multiple levels. There's one of just something is this a solution that would help improve our condition? And is it a solution that is going to improve our situation enough that it's worth the effort to make the change? So those are the first things. So oftentimes, once you get through that first stage of belief, then now they're getting to that point of, okay, but I really want to understand it. And so the understanding phase comes after belief. So if I believe that there's something here, right, there's a possible ROI, there's a possible return, there's a possible change that's going to improve my situation and make things better, I want to truly understand it. And when you get to that point, that's usually where people are starting to ask questions around the feature set in the tool. Mm-hmm. They're thinking about the use cases that they're trying to achieve. They're thinking about how they're going to navigate and find the different things that are built into the application. So at least in a SaaS context, usually when you're thinking about understanding, it's getting into that idea. But okay, so I can see the idea here. I have a problem, you have a solution. I think that solution might work, but now I want to know how that works in the real world. And so those questions are usually different. And I would say in this phase, most people are still really unsure because they might have an inkling of a belief, right? You've convinced them that there's something here and they're starting to investigate a little bit further, but that means there's usually going to be lots of questions or expression of confusion or concern over the connection to the things you're offering and the benefit that you've sold them on. Right. So they're like, your solution is going to make you better, but now I want to get into the particulars and I'm going to get into the weeds. And that's usually where people are. That's like I guess you could call it the kick the tires phase. If you were buying a car, that's where everybody wants to really get into the nitty gritty of all the different components that exist.
So Todd, this is huge for anybody that's in CS or a seller that's listening today. Is often someone wants to jump into the weeds and we're like, hey, let's get at that at a different time. First, I still want to make sure that you understand the value that you're going to get. So this isn't always, because I never like to speak in the always, never, ever, right? Just it's one thing or another. I would caution people that if someone's wanting to get in the weeds, you already have them in belief. So what you might want to explore in the understanding stage is, okay, how are you doing that today? And let them explain more of what the weeds are that they're going through so that they actually understand the amount of effort that they're putting forth. So when you start to walk through how this will be accomplished, they can compare that situation, because the belief is, there's a little belief there. That's why they're getting into the weeds, right? So I think it's a cool framework to think about is if you're getting people to ask you about getting into the weeds of things, don't try to bring them back to value that they have a belief in. Now what you want to do is get an understanding of the time and effort they're actually putting in today and what that would look like with your solution. So I love the framework because I've seen myself as a seller go, oh, wait, let's parking lot that. I still got some things to cover on the value. And I, of course, don't say it that way, but that's what I'm thinking in my head, right? Because you're jumping the gun, but maybe they're not because that belief is there. So good take.
Well, and one of the things, so I want to go through the whole framework, but one of the things I want to do is come back to this, Casey, and then think through how do we get better at identifying where they actually are, right? Because the first part is they might be asking believing questions. They might be asking understanding questions. They might be asking understanding questions, but they're still in the believing stage. So like to your point, that's possible. So then how do you know if they're not just masking where they're at? Because to your point, a lot of times people don't feel comfortable to actually tell you where they're at, what they're thinking and what they're feeling. So I want to come back to this idea of once we understand these different stages that we're going through in our mental framework of how we're thinking through a buying decision, then there's also the how do you and I, as the person who is trying to be the influencer and help someone make a change in their mental state, how do we understand which phase they're actually in? So we'll come back to that. But
awesome.
Okay, so third element here, obviously, is this is where we tend to think the end of the row is, and that's the deciding phase. And so the deciding phase is the questions that they're going to be asking themselves start to be a little bit different. So like if the first phase is like, I don't know if this is really a solution I want, or if this is a solution that can even really do anything for me, to do I understand how this solution works so I can feel confident that it's going to give me the thing that I want. Now the next stage, they're going to start asking very different questions because they're going to say, okay, but like, how do I roll this out? So I've got, like in a tech context, I've got teams that need to be informed and they need to be trained and they need to be taught how to use the solution. I've got to get buy-in from leadership. So I need to understand who's going to own it. I might be asking myself, what do I need to do if I have to change course mid rollout, right? So how difficult is it going to be to change where I'm going? So at this point, if you get to the deciding phase, generally, I would say that the people already believe in the problem and the solution. So they know that the problem exists. They believe your solution can solve it. And they are really focused on this point on I can't say the word, operationalizing. Is that a word?
All right. Okay. Good job, Todd.
Right. So the idea there is like, you're trying to figure out, okay, if I take this solution and I plug it in, like now I understand how it works, but I know that it's going to have like impacts downstream. So I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to actually implement it. So that's a little bit about how you get there. So that, and a lot of times I would say these are where deals start to stall out because it's like I bought in, I understand how this solution works, but now when the rubber actually hits the road and I got to get the rest of the organization bought in and I've got to figure out how to actually roll this thing out, that's where a lot of these things stall. Because when it actually comes into that getting decision process done, I realize as the person who might be having these questions in my mind that it's usually a committee of people who are involved, and I got to figure out how to make that all happen. So the deciding questions are very different because it's not about being sold. It's on the like, can I actually get there? Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. And I think this is the one that most people can identify with, right? Like, what's your pricing? Do you have customer references? What are use cases? Like, how much time is this going to take? Right? Like, I think most of us understand this part pretty well in saying, okay, I think that they have the belief, they have the understanding. Now it's okay, they're deciding on which solution to use because obviously no one's just investigating your solution, right? In today's world, no one's just looking at you. They're looking at multiple other ways. And one of the ways is just staying put. Like, status quo is actually better than the other things that we went out and researched. We're actually doing really well. So decision, that's there's books written about this part. But totally. I think we usually identify where we're at on this one.
Yeah, well, and like as an example, we a couple years ago we spent a lot of time talking about MedPick on this
Right.
podcast, and I'd say MedPick like fits squarely in this level, right? Because
Right.
MedPick is an acronym designed to help you really understand specifically deciding. So in
Right.
sales, deciding is where like I would say most people spend the majority of their time, and so which is important. So really, really cool. And the last stage though, right? Because this is the part that's really important. Is so let's say I've decided and I've purchased. Well, the sale's not over at that point. So then there's becoming questions. And so what's interesting if you get here to this level, the last phase, right? So there's believing, understanding, deciding, and then becoming. A becoming question is when it comes down to how do we actually grow with this product? How are we going to make a difference? So that's where we're actually asking questions of like, what does success look like 6 months from now? How are we going to get the full value out of this? And so how are we going to get the full value out of it? How do I scale usage? How do I get more people across the organization using this tool? Or like another really good idea here is if your customer is actually identifying new initiatives or new goals. So it's not just like, okay, I've identified this goal, I reached this goal, but I'm now moving beyond. So for me, that last stage is like, is that customer actually advancing and looking for growth with your solution? Or have they just actually bought in and said, okay, I'm going to get what I'm going to get and I'm done? Because there has to be this continual like change and development. And so you kind of like you could almost think through this as like a cycle you're going through of, I let's say I believed it, I understood it, I bought it, and I delivered it. Am I done? Or do I need to go through and identify a new problem and a new solution that I can get belief in and understand and decide on and become? So it's almost like a cycle. I guess you could think through it in that phrase too.
Well, Todd, you're hitting on a key point that I don't think if I was consulting with CS leadership, that I don't think they'd understand this model. Because what their belief is, and not everybody, again, I'm going to say a majority of CS leadership is, well, I couldn't renew that deal because it was sold wrong. Because they believe that the customer that decided and purchased, and now we're transitioning into, okay, using the product, that everybody's bought in and everybody's ready to do this. They forget that everybody's individuals. And so now they're meeting the person that actually is implementing it and the team that actually is going to get this out to their users. Well, you're starting over usually. And what their desires and what they want to accomplish with your software might be different than why it was purchased. So don't let that shock you. You're just starting the cycle again of, okay, what's the belief at, where they're at? Do they understand how this is all going to work? Have they all bought in on the decision of getting there? And are they ready to go become that, right? So don't get fooled that, like you said, that this is just a pre-sales sold type of framework. This is throughout the customer life cycle. Is you're always going to run into different individuals, and they might be in one of those 4 stages. And that's why I love this framework, is trying to understand where they're actually at. This new person I inherited, are they a believer already, or are they skeptical because they inherited this project and they got 10 other things they are doing, and they just feel like they got punished by taking over your software? Where are they at? So yeah, I think that's huge in letting people understand that.
Yes, for sure. So the maybe that's a really good segue into, by the way, all of a sudden I realized, I mean, I made this framework up. I didn't intend it to be like a named framework, but I'm it's the Budbee framework. I just realized that. Believe, understand, decide, and become the Budbee. So, but
okay,
great. Everybody loves acronyms. Why not introduce new ones? We're going to introduce Gen Z terminology today and cool new phrases. Why not be a Budbee? I don't know. Okay, so the part that I think is interesting and where I want to go next, Casey, is so we've identified that your customers, and again, whether you're selling internally or to your kids, right,
yeah.
or to anybody and everybody, like this is just the process that we go through as we're trying to figure out what we want to do. And so the question is, how do we get better at recognizing where people are? You said something awesome, right? Which is, let's say I inherit a new person. Well, if someone seems skeptical, then that would mean that they're in belief, right? Because skepticism is a sign that you don't believe in a solution. So I'd be curious, like, what are some of the things that would be a red flag to you now that you're thinking about if someone's skeptical? What would be some of the things that would help you identify whether or not somebody is a skeptic in this belief phase?
Okay, so two things I want to make a comment on. Number one, Todd, is if having the right mindset that when someone asks me a question that I understand they're in the belief stage. Like, I'm not upset about that. Having the understanding that this is where the person at is huge. That's why I love the framework. Is if someone says, well, I just don't see how that's going to work. Well, we're like, oh my gosh, this person just, they're not getting it. Well, yeah, they're not getting it. They just don't believe yet. Okay, so how do I now tailor this conversation to get them to belief stage? So that might be I get them involved in my community and say, you know what? That's a great question that you're having. And it sounds like you're trying to understand, is this really going to work? Rather than me tell you, there's another client that I have that's similar situation. Well, let's get you two together and do a little brainstorming, mind sharing, and have you walk through that. Okay, because I understand they're in the belief stage. So I know where I should probably lead them. So for me, a red flag is if me on the other end, if I'm taking offense to those questions, which we sometimes do. Okay, I've been caught off guard and I'm thinking I'm I'm this deal's been sold. Why is this person stalling out? Gosh, they're just probably playing a political game. And I tell myself this story where maybe they're just in the belief stage. Okay. All right. Now I got it. I understand it. So that's number one. Number two.
Can I say something here? Because you made me think about something that I think is important. And this is from a person who came up with this framework because I generally think I stink at this. And so I've been trying to figure out a way to get better at it. Right. So just to be clear here, I didn't create this, or I didn't come up with this idea of how to articulate this because I think I'm the pro. I actually came up with it because I think I'm bad at it.
Yeah. Self-medication. Right. I get it.
Exactly. Totally. So what's interesting here is you mentioned something that I think at least got me thinking a lot. Right. So one is I love the point that you shouldn't be offended if somebody is not believing yet. It's a great opportunity. But for me, the question is like, what is the right way? So I love the idea of because I think it's true. One of the things that can help you be bought in is hearing the testimony of others, right? You hear someone else who's totally bought into the idea or the solution. That makes a big difference. But the thing that I have a hard time with is, let's say that you recognize, Casey, that I don't believe you. Is it better to call direct attention to it, or would that make someone feel uncomfortable? And if you think it is better to actually call attention to the fact that they don't believe yet, what's the right way to do that? Like, would it be okay to say, like, it seems like you're not bought into the solution? Is that okay in that phase? Is it better to give voice and allow them to actually say it out loud? Like, yeah, I don't know that I'm really bought in. Or do you just ignore it and then try to move on, or just try to keep shoving the dog food down their throat, even though they don't want it? Like, what's the right way to, let's say you recognize that's where they are. How do you address the elephant in the room without making them feel uncomfortable? How do you make them feel safe, but also recognize it? Because it seems like that would open up a lot of possibilities, but I don't know.
Okay, so there's no easy answer on this. So there's three things that I would recommend. Number one, I call it out. I try to do a good job of this. Again, no one's an expert at this. We're always learning at that. But just saying, hey, it seems that you have not seen our solution work yet. Is that fair to say? Like something like that. That it's not. I'm not accusatory. You just have not experienced this yet. So, one, you can call out. Number two, if you have a great relationship with your executive sponsor or a manager, and this is the person that's been asked to implement, I'm taking that conversation to that person and saying, hey, we had a great call with Joey. He sounds delightful. I'm excited to work with him, but it seems like he's stressed. Like he has a lot of things going on. And maybe he's not believing that this solution is going to help the company or just himself. How do we best support him? And again, maybe I'm reading this wrong, but this is kind of the feeling I'm getting. Again, you have to have a good relationship with that executive sponsor or the manager to have that question. And you don't want to throw the person under the bus. You're just saying, hey, how do we support this person? Number 3 is I like being able to, again, going back to that part of like, not just recognize it, but offer a solution of, hey, let's get you in contact with some people, right? Whether that's internal, where you know a department's had success, or a customer that's in the same situation. So recognize it and then give, hey, let's get you on the same page of how this could help. Let me have you talk to so and so. Would you be open to that? Right. So those would be 3 things that I've seen work.
So basically, if I'm going to Todd bot this because I really like that idea, Casey. But basically, there's you would talk directly to the person who you think doesn't believe and say, "Hey, it seems like you're struggling with this." Maybe you could even take the opposite tact where you could be like, "Hey, are you seeing any early good signs that this could be a good fit?" Right? Something like that, where it doesn't necessarily have to be negative. Like, hey, I see you're not negative, but then maybe even trying to see if they go positive or negative with you. But the idea is first, go to the individual. Second would be expand to other people within the organization to try to help understand and bridge why that person might be struggling. And then third would be find other true believers to then help them come into play. Would that be fair? So those kind of the 3 things you suggested. Okay. So then the understanding piece. So for me, I actually really like this because if belief is based off of or surrounded around skepticism, then what is the telltale sign of that someone is in an understanding phase? And to me, it would actually be that they're expressing some level of confusion. So confusion is different than skepticism, right? And so for me, how do you understand if someone's confused, right? If you move into that understanding phase, if you're in a confusion level, then what do you do to understand if someone's confused? I don't know, but I'm curious. Thoughts there. How do you recognize if someone is actually in that confusion stage?
Again, we put labels on everything. So confusion means negativity, but in your framework, confusion just means what stage they're in, which I love. Again, that's why I really love the framework. So for me, that's where I think it's helpful to get the understanding of how they do this process today. What do you do today to make this work? Because what they're not understanding usually is this is the way I do it today. I'm not getting how I'm doing it in your product. That's usually the confusion. And so if you can better understand what they're doing today and say, oh, all you're going to do differently is this. Oh, okay. I get that, right? This is the other one, Chris Voss. Shout out to our guy, Chris Voss, is fall on the sword. Like
we're buddies. We're gonna get Chris Voss on the podcast next week.
Right. But
thanks everybody. Yeah.
This is the one where I always fall on the sword on this one. It sounds like I'm doing a horrible job of explaining this. What's not clear? And then they're either going to do 2 things. They're going to tell you what's not clear, or they're going to have to say in their brain, no, you explained it really well. I understand it now. It is hard for someone to say the word no and then give an explanation. You have to explain why you said no. It's human psychology. I don't know why, but people do it. If we give them the ability to say yes, again, going back to the point that most people are nice, they're going to say, yeah, that makes sense. And it didn't really make sense to them. So those would be the 2 things I'd point out on that.
Yeah, I love it. And for me, belief and understanding is the place where I feel like we should be spending more of our time here, like helping people naturally progress along this journey of their questions. And I love your point, like being skeptical or being confused. Those aren't negative things for the person. We tend to get mad at the person who is confused or skeptical.
Right.
But we should be getting mad at ourselves if we are failing to get rid of the confusion or get rid of the skepticism. And the way we do that is actually recognizing it and not just glossing over it, not just moving past it, but actually working to resolve it.
Yeah. Just think of it. Just think of someone that has a nail, and they're asking you for what tool should they use. Are you frustrated about that? And then you give them a screwdriver, and they're like, "What? This doesn't make any sense, right?" It's like that's why it's so important to understand what emotion they're at, or like this framework. Are they in belief or understand? So you can actually hand them the right tool.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so this is where it starts getting really interesting to me, because I know how to kind of summarize where you are from being skeptical and being confused in those first two stages. I don't know what word I would associate best with kind of the thought or the feeling associated with deciding type questions that you're asking yourself. So how, like, the first word that came to my mind was like fear, right? But fear kind of exists in a lot of these different things, or at least anxiety or worry that kind of exists at a lot of these different phases. So I don't know that really works. So I'm curious what your thoughts are. Like, how would you define the kind of the attitude or the feeling maybe that someone at that stage would have? Because fear doesn't feel quite right, because that feels a little broader. Like, is there a specific thing that would you could kind of, we're trying to label mostly so it's easier for us to identify if people are in this phase. But what do you think for deciding?
I would go, and you'll probably come up with a better term. This is the stage where they're either taking action or inaction. Like, they know what they should do, and if they're not doing it, well, there's something in that decision-making process that's slowing this down. So what is it? Right. And that might be someone in that committee is not understanding or lack of belief, or where that might be, right? But the defining thing is they're taking action, they're progressing, or they've stalled out, but you've given them everything that they need to progress. So, okay, why are they not progressing? And that's what I think would be the label I'd give to on this stage.
Yeah, you're right, because when you're making a decision, you're making a decision based off of the fact that you already have all the right information, or you think you do.
Right.
But oftentimes there are external factors, and so if someone is actually has made a decision, that means they are going to take action. So would maybe this is going to sound weird, but would we call it, because for me, this is the place where most deals, at least if you're trying to get a sale done, it seems like this is where they'll oftentimes fizzle. You can get someone here. So would you call this like, this is like the waffly stage, right? Where you feel a little waffly, or you feel a little unstable. You feel unsteady. Is that the idea? So if like the first one is confusion, but the other one is like, you don't feel stable yet. So it's characterized by lack of stability. Like, I know, like, I'm kind of going back and forth. I'm constantly waffling with my decision, because there's something blocking me from moving forward.
It's either accelerating or it's waffling, wobbly. Yeah, any of that.
Yeah, there we go. You're wobbly. So you go from being skeptical to confused to wobbly. Love it. So then for me, that's where becoming is that last one, when it comes down to, okay, so now that I've gotten to sure ground, I'm to a steady ground. But for me, it would be becoming the word I would associate that might be progression. So the idea is I've gotten to a sure level, but I'm no longer static, right? So like if I'm wobbly or I'm on unsure ground in the decision phase, once I get to the become phase, I'm solid. But have I decided I'm happy where I'm at, or am I going to progress? I'm going to move forward. Growth or progress is what I would associate probably with becoming. So
yeah, I would call this is when your customer is like, hey, what if we, and you're like, oh, that's a cool idea.
Yeah.
Like that's a becoming stage in the positive. But there's also maybe an opposite to all things, right? This is also the stage where people start to say, hey, I don't think this is working out.
Yeah. Or they're saying we don't need. It kind of means like I'm damming my progress. I've decided I've gotten where I want to go.
Yes.
So that's when they get to the point where, like, if they're constantly saying we have or we don't need, that means they feel like they've arrived. So they might be in stable ground now, but that means that they're not ready, or they don't believe that they could make progress. So that to me, progress is this idea of now I'm going to start over. I'm going to have to figure out okay, well, if you're happy with where you are now, then you don't believe that there's something else you could do in the future, and the whole journey starts over again.
Yeah. So, and TK, this is the one where most people get frustrated on a customer success stage is, well, you're not doing anything. And so we're not using all the licenses, but you're happy with where you're at. But I know that's going to hurt me and my company at renewal time, because you're going to downsize, or you're going to go to some other software because you're not using it to its full potential. The becoming stage is a tough one, because you want so much more for your customer. So if you're hearing the stage of like, gosh, I don't know if we're ready for that or things like that. Okay, one, you're in the becoming stage, but this person that you're now working with, you got to start all over and go back to the belief stage.
Yes, you just moved back to the belief stage all over again.
Is.
Yeah,
there it
exactly.
Is.
So cool. So I hope people like this. Like I said, I made it up because I've been trying to figure out a way to better understand the conversations that I have with people, whether I'm trying to sell something internally or if I'm trying to talk to a customer and convince them to change their current state, or, I'm trying to convince my kids that they need to stick with their gymnastics program, whatever that might be. Right. So this is I hope a framework that people can find valuable. But we'd love people's thoughts. We'd love their reactions to it. So feel free, if you're here for the first time, leave us a comment and let us know what you think. Help us to figure out how we can all get better at asking questions and understanding the questions that the people that we are working with are actually asking themselves.
Todd, is that the homework? Because we leave every episode with homework. Is that it?
Yeah, I would say the homework in this case is just start by seeing if you can get better at identifying or guessing where you think someone's mental state is. Are they asking believing questions, understanding questions, deciding questions, or becoming questions? And if you understand that, then now the secondary homework piece, if you can just understand that, that's a great start. But if you can understand it, can you also validate it by demonstrating to the person through your conversation with them that you really truly get them? Because what do we all want to do? We don't want to just understand. We also want to be understood. So doing better at that will be great. But that first step is, can you just identify where people are in their mindset?
Beautiful. Well, thank you everyone for joining us on this episode of SaaS Therapy. As always, our goal is to help you save your most important relationship, your customer. Todd, that was an awesome framework. You self-medicated well today. Nice job.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. SaaS Therapy is brought to you by Brainstorm, the SaaS platform for SaaS adoption. Learn more at brainstorminc.com.